After the edge of the seat battle, we now gear up for a workshop. This is called Unveiling Power by Dr. Nandini, Murali, VP Learning and Research, Avatar Group. So when women use their power with intent and direction, they can actually create wonders, Pande. However, we know that there are a million ways of doing it. So what could be the right way to unleash it effectively? Let's listen to Dr. Nandini.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session, Unveiling Power, Transformative Leadership for Senior Women Executives. I love this quotation by Alice Walker, the well-known American author. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Why are we talking about power and leadership pathways for women? There is a very significant absence of a robust leadership trajectory for senior women professionals. The statistics are stark. Only 4% of the CEOs are women, and only 15% of the seats of boards of directors are held by women, says a Deloitte study. There is a significant lack of sufficient numbers of women in senior leadership roles in India. In 2016, the share of women CEOs in India stood at 6.6%, but declined to 3.4% in 2018. And in 2021, it stood at a disappointing 4.7%, way below previous levels, says a Deloitte study. We need to equip women in senior leadership roles with perspectives and strategies to excel in their leadership trajectory. Globally, only 15% of highly paid executives of Fortune 500 companies are women, says a Fortune study. We need women to envision a powerful leadership style and operate from a space of agency, authenticity, accountability, and purpose. In 2021, Fortune 500 companies in India had 5 women CEOs who were the first ever women CEOs appointed in the history of their respective companies, says a study by Fortune. The objectives of today's session are to build our knowledge, attitudes, and skills on power as a critical factor in building and nurturing conscious leadership among senior women leaders. I'd like us to begin with a reflection. What is the first word that comes up when you hear the word power? Avoid thinking there is no right or wrong answer. Whatever the first word that bubbles up to the surface is what we need to stay with. These are photographs of very well-known people. I'm sure we recognize most of them. Some of them are political leaders. Some of them are contemporary leaders. Some of them are business people. Some of them are CEO, are leaders of organizations. Some of them are thought leaders. Some of them are sports persons. Some of them are writers. And we have two political leaders here who were actually notorious for their dictatorial regimes, Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler. The point I'm trying to make is that our very engagement and perspectives on power is undergoing a radical change. So we need to really understand, explore, and unpack what is power and how do we engage with power. Let's look at the concept of power and its role in leadership. If you've engaged with what is the first word that comes up to your mind when you think of the word power, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the words that came up for us are often related to negative connotations about power. In fact, the word power itself has become a kind of much dreaded and notorious word. It's often widely and stereotypically associated with words like control, oppression, etc. And it's associated with assigned leaders, leaders who have inherited their position, or leaders in a leadership position, rather than leaders who are emerging. However, I think what we need to be very careful about is that power per se is not something negative or to be avoided. We need power in the way we transact in the everyday world. But what we need to be careful about, what we need to be watchful, is certainly the abuse or misuse of power. So we can't really dump power itself as negative, as not necessary, but certainly power is the lubricant that enables our lives, our organizations to run smoothly. But abuse and misuse of power is certainly a no-no, and therefore something to be we need to be careful about. Here are some toxic myths about all expressions of power that we would seek to debunk today. Women have had an uneasy relationship with power. Most of us perceive power as negative and something to be avoided. There is not enough power to go around, so one has to extract power or usurp it from others. For most of it, when it comes to exercising power, we exercise power from a space of fear and ego. So, therefore, the assumption that power is fearful and therefore has to be avoided. Here are some very interesting data points about gender and power. An HBR study of 4,000 men and women reveals that women have less desire for professional power than men. And also, very interestingly, compared to men, women have more life goals, but fewer are focused on power. Women anticipate more negative outcomes from attaining a high power position, and women are less likely than men to jump at opportunities for professional advancement. It is clear that most women have a very weakened or little or no engagement with power, and therefore it's time for us to reframe power and look within us to explore and unpack our own engagement and equations with power. Oh, power, we are also demystifying power here. Power is our inherent energy. All of us have power. It's a robust expression of our intentionality to engage equitably with the world and enrich relationships. For me, power pivots on the tenet. Through my interactions, how do I enrich myself, the people involved, and the larger context? In other words, power is not just win win, but when we exercise power with self awareness from a space of authenticity, we not only enrich ourselves, we enrich the other person, and equally, we enrich the context in which we operate. However, one needs to guard against hubris, which is otherwise known as the excessive pride and self confidence that comes with power. Leadership is the intentional, conscious, and purposeful exercise of power to achieve desired outcomes. Seen in this context, a leader is someone who is very self aware when they engage with power. We also need to distinguish between true or authentic power versus false or inauthentic power. People often engage in ego and fear based power games, and when this happens, one person, the person who exercises the power, usually wins, and the other person loses. So it results in what is known as win lose dualities. Such ego or fear based efforts are like band aids. They offer temporary solutions or respites, but they never provide a long term sustainable solution. True power is not power over, but power with. When people exercise power from a power over perspective, it's very top down. It's you do what I say. It's my way or the highway. But when you exercise power from a power with perspective, there is a leveling, there is an equitable, equal playing field, and the exercise of power is done so that people move towards achieving common goals and objectives. However, inauthentic or false power offers temporary solutions. I love this reflection by Carol Stern, who's the CEO of the US Fund for UNICEF. I love the way she defines power as the opportunity and ability to have an impact. I think for a really long time, power was defined as money. For me, power is about the ability to bring about change and have an impact. When I think about where I am powerful, what have I done in this world? I have helped to raise a lot of money. That's great. But I've also changed how people feel about coming to work. That's powerful for me. I've helped my children see that the world's bigger than themselves. That's really powerful to me. I really think that's the definition of power, being able to impact others. From her speech, it's very, very interesting to see that Stern does redefine power. And how does she redefine power? She redefines power as the opportunity and ability to have an impact on others. Is she expressing true or false power? It's obvious that she is expressing true or authentic power. However, power for me is not just about creating an impact on others, having the ability to impact and influence others. It's also about the ability to look within yourselves and explore and engage with our own personal equation with power. So, when we talk about power, it's a very inside out process, because only if we are personally comfortable with our power, only when we can own our power, do we have the ability to make an impact and influence others. What do we mean by women's equation with power? Historically, culturally, socially, across geographies, and in a contemporary context, women have had a very uncomfortable equation with power. What is this due to? Largely due to our gendered socialization. The socialization of girls and boys is very, very different according in across geographies and cultures. For right from a young age, girls are trained in compliance behavior. We are trained to obey. We are trained not to ask questions. We are trained to place others' needs and concerns and preferences above ourselves, sometimes even neglecting our own needs and concerns. And we have a very low sense of entitlement because we've never been encouraged to ask. So all these factors makes us very uncomfortable, makes us very ambivalent. We are not sure, how do we engage with power? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing to explore our equations with power? Therefore, as a result, as we grow up into adulthood, we have a very weakened or we are absolutely disconnected from our own power, and also disconnected with engaging with all forms of expressions of power. This is a very interesting classification by French and Raven, two social psychologists who conducted a very interesting study on the basis of power. Although it was conducted in the late 1950s, much of what they say is relevant even today. Raven and French classify all powers into two broad categories: positional power and personal power. Positional power is related to one's position or authority in an organization. And personal power has nothing to do with position or authority, but it is linked to one's personal characteristics, personality, skills, attributes, and competencies. As the term implies, positional power can be taken away, snatched from you. And positional power, in turn, is subdivided into legitimate power. This is the boss power. Reward power, someone who has the authority to either reward you or punish you and coerce you to doing what they want. Coercive power is the power using one's power to make one do what one wants. And resource power, controlling access to resources. These could be financial, this could be material, this could be any kind of resources. Under personal power, we have referent power. Referent power is the it's the feeling we experience when we like someone. It's the likability factor. And that's a very, very human tendency. Expert power is the power you have on account of one's special attributes or expertise or experience or special abilities. Information power is about what I know, and connection power is about being connected to the right set of contacts. So, while positional power can be taken away, personal power cannot be taken away. However, personal power can be lost if we are not careful about holding on to our sources of personal power. These are some very interesting metaphors for why women are underrepresented in senior leadership roles across the globe and especially in India. I'm sure we've all heard of the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is the invisible barrier that prevents potential women from reaching executive roles after a certain point. The glass cliff. This is a phenomenon that reinforces stereotypes about women not being ideal in leadership positions. Women are not cut out for leadership due to various reasons. The maternal wall, I'm sure this is something very familiar to all of us. These are the stereotypes and various forms of discrimination encountered by mothers and working mothers and mothers seeking re-employment or employment. The glass escalator, it's a very, very interesting phenomenon. It's a structural when there are men in female dominated positions, men have a structural advantage that tends to enhance their careers. And then, of course, we have also what is the sticky floor. This is a discriminatory employment pattern that keeps workers, mainly women, in the lower ranks of the job scale with low mobility and invisible barriers to career advancement. Bamboo ceiling is the professional barriers encountered by women of Asian descent. Stained glass ceiling is barriers faced by women in religious organizations. And the last term is something I find very, very interesting. This is the concrete ceiling, obstacles faced by women of color. A very well-known a very well-known psychologist had said that women of color, the barriers they face is the concrete wall, because when the ceiling is a glass ceiling, at least you can see through the other end. But when the barrier is concrete, it is opaque and it's unbreakable. And this reflects something worse than the glass ceiling. When women navigate leadership pathways, it's like a labyrinth or a maze. If you've seen a labyrinth or a maze, it's in the form of concentric circles. There is one viable way to the center, but you'll have to figure that out. And the only way to figure that out is if you have the courage to stay on the path and explore and learn through trial and error. So, how do women emerge as leaders who own their paths? I love what these writers have talked about in their article "Women and the Labyrinth of Leadership" in the in the HBR series. As a contemporary symbol, the labyrinth conveys the idea of a complex journey towards a goal worth striving for. Passage through a labyrinth is not simple or direct, but requires persistence, patience, awareness of one's progress, and a careful analysis of the puzzles that lie ahead. It takes a lot of courage, patience, and persistence to navigate the labyrinth. And these researchers say that women's leadership pathway is like journeying through a labyrinth or a maze. It's time we revisioned and reframed how we look at power. We need to re-engage with power. We need to really be very clear about what is our concept of power. How do we engage with power in because for most of us, we give away power without being aware of it. And since we give away our power, the task of reclaiming our power is also something which is our responsibility. As women, we need to be aware of the impact of historical, social, and cultural factors, our own gendered socialization, and how much of these gendered stereotypes we have internalized. It's become part of us. I'm very fond of this statement. Gender is not taught; it's caught. And we need to understand the role of these multiple converging factors that create a meta narrative of women's very, very weakened engagement with power. So, when we're talking about power and leadership, it's very, very important for us to understand what do we mean by conscious leadership. Conscious leadership is a style of leadership. It's a style of transformative leadership where leaders exercise power with a great deal of self awareness, where leaders are very comfortable with their equation with power. They not only are empowered, but they also work towards empowering colleagues and people around them. In conscious leadership, a leader becomes radically responsible. I love the term radically responsible, very, very self aware. And conscious leaders work towards creating a culture of we rather than a culture of I, me, myself. There's a lot of differences between traditional leadership and conscious leadership. Traditional leadership rests on authority and power, whereas conscious leadership rests on active listening, coaching, mentoring, and a very, very deep and intimate engagement with power. Traditional leaders are self focused, independent, and performance driven, whereas conscious leaders are self aware, very connected both with themselves and with people around them and their teams. For traditional leaders, work comes first and everything can follow later. Whereas for conscious leaders, they always strive to create a harmony, a balance, an integration between work and life because they see both these as interdependent and neither of them is more important than the other. Traditional leaders are very, very tight lipped, very, very top down, very bureaucratic, and information is not shared freely, or information is shared with just a select few. Whereas conscious leaders are transparent and they share information openly. They're very receptive to feedback. They ask questions and invite input from all, and they create tremendous psychological safety at the workplace. Traditional leadership prioritizes I, me, myself, whereas the central principle of conscious leadership is a we culture, and therefore this in turn creates inclusion and a sense of belongingness. Traditional leaders are very, very result oriented and sometimes at the expense of people, whereas conscious leaders prioritize people. This doesn't mean that performance and results are not important for them, but the priority is people. And when there is a focus on building people, results and performance automatically follow. Power is a very multifaceted, multidimensional term. It's like a sparkling, a gorgeous sparkling diamond. There are several aspects of power, and it's like peeling an onion. There are layers and layers of how do we integrate the agentic and communal aspects of leadership to lead with balance? What do we mean by agentic leadership? Traditionally, leadership is seen as a masculine quality. Leaders need to be dominant, aggressive, controlling, top down, whereas conscious leaders create that tribe or sanghahood for women who support and enable each other to transform and grow. Avtar's latest offering is a comprehensive program on transformative leadership for senior women executives. This is the Pathways to Power. For more details on Pathways to Power and to register, write to Nandini at avtarcc.com. I do hope that you found this session interesting. Thank you for being with me and looking forward to interacting soon with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nandini. That was a nice workshop on the on the concept of power. I was wondering if power was something negative, but it is such a multifaceted and a multi-layered concept, as you've explained, and that's beautiful to know. And We hope that all the women out there discover their own power to make their careers, do better for the communities and make a world of difference. Thank you so much for that. With that, we come to the end of this session. We take a few minutes of break. You can network in that time being. At the launch, you can also use the chat option for the same. We'll be back at 5:55 p.m. Do remember to go back to the main page of the platform, to the main agenda page, and select the session tab for the upcoming session. Please note that these join session tabs will be active only for the time mentioned for the session. We will see you at around 5:55 p.m. for the awards.